What's up, birthday girl? Birthday girl, birthday girl. You feeling yourself today? Put that Fiji water down, god damn it. Didn't I teach you about being brand loyal? I know it's your birthday. God! How you feel? Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. Everybody wish Cass happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Was you breaking it down? You was about to break it down? Homegirl Cassie right here, she had a I would say it was a whack show. She had a pretty whack show on BET. Did not perform at the level of the bad boy excellence, I would say. That's keeping it all the way funky,
Welcome back to Voice and Value, the space where we talk all things relationships, personality, healing, and what it really means to reclaim your voice and your value. If you've been following the headlines, then you already know the conversation around Diddy and his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura has been buzzing, especially after Cassie's testimony in court with details about her decade-long relationship with Sean Combs, better known as Diddy. Videos have surfaced, explicit text messages have been revealed, and allegations confirmed what many have suspected for years, and that's that Cassie was in an abusive relationship with Diddy, which involved violence, surveillance, isolation, and exploitation. I won't be sharing that infamous hotel footage today, but I do want to focus on Cassie with respect to her testimony and why she stayed so long in such a tumultuous relationship. Now, before I jump into that, I challenge you to park your bias at the door. Unless you've been living under a rock, you saw that hotel footage of Cassie getting stomped and dragged by Diddy, and you probably heard that just 2 days later, the couple was back together, both smiling for the camera as if they were relationship goals. In her sworn court testimony, Cassie gave detailed accounts about her and Diddy's adult bedroom activities that were outside the realm of what one would consider lovemaking. It was more like 50 Shades of Grey on steroids. There was BDSM, voyeurism, orgies, and cuckold activities all rolled up into what was called freak-offs. Yeah, it was quite explicit, but it was done between consenting adults, allegedly. And that's not illegal. That's just freaking off. But today, I'm going to talk specifically about a question that's been posed, and that is Cassie a victim or an opportunist? Or was it something else? Trauma bonding? Control? Fear, perhaps? Or was it all wrapped up in the complexity of love, survival, and manipulation? Let's explore it. But we're going to do it without judgment and with clarity, because this isn't just about Cassie. It's about the women we know, the women we've been at some point in our lives, or the women we've tried to save. Let's start with the basics. Are we witnessing a case of Stockholm Syndrome? Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological response that happens when a victim develops an emotional bond with their abuser or captor. The term comes from a 1973 bank robbery that took place in Stockholm, Sweden, where hostages started sympathizing with the criminals who held them at gunpoint. Stockholm Syndrome isn't a formal diagnosis like PTSD or depression. It's more of a label for what happens when someone starts to identify with, to protect, or even love the person that's hurting them. Now, when people look at Cassie's 10-year relationship with Diddy and ask, why didn't she just leave? The quicker answer might be, she must have had Stockholm Syndrome. Because why else, right? Well, not so fast. Because that can oversimplify what's really going on in these kind of relationships. So let's go deeper. Cassie was just 19 years old when she signed to Diddy's label. He was a powerful and much older man at 37 years old, and he was in the music industry. Diddy signed Cassie to a 10-year contract with his Bad Boy Records label. Within a few years, they started dating, according to Cassie. Just think about that power dynamic. Young, upcoming artist, rich older man with total control over your music, your image, and your opportunities. Over the next decade, their relationship went from private whispers to very public appearances, but even then, there were rumors. There were whispers of control and manipulation, of Cassie being his doll, his product, his possession. Whole time Diddy was in a relationship with Kim Porter, with whom he fathered 3 children. Was Cassie considered a home wrecker? Absolutely, unless you want to argue that the home was already wrecked when Cassie came on the scene. Still, she was a side chick. A side chick who eventually got promoted to girlfriend status. And we all know that doesn't happen very often. And by her own admission, Cassie was a jealous girlfriend at that. Many people might choose to judge Cassie for not having a moral compass, but again, no laws were broken. Not even marital laws, because Diddy never married anyone. And now, what has come out in court documents and settlement claims is that Cassie endured abuse, physically, emotionally, and sexually. So the real question isn't just why did she stay, but what kept her there so long? Let's talk about some of the real possibilities, because there are many. Trauma bonding is a real thing, and it's powerful. It happens when a cycle of abuse and reward confuses the brain's sense of love and danger. Your abuser hurts you and then comforts you. They tear you down and then build you back up, just enough to keep you there. And here's the thing. The longer it goes on, the more intense the bond becomes. The brain actually starts associating the abuser with survival. You need them to feel safe, even though they're the very person making you unsafe. In Cassie's case, she was with Diddy during the formative years of her life, and that kind of grooming, shall I say, emotionally and professionally, can blur the lines of consent and connection. When Cassie was hurt, Diddy may have been the same person comforting her. When she felt lost, he was the person guiding her career, her sense of identity. That bond isn't love, but it feels like love, especially when your self-worth is being shaped by the same person who's destroying it. Another area we need to consider is coercive control. That's when someone uses a pattern of behavior to dominate another person, and not always with violence, but with things like isolation, surveillance, financial control, and emotional manipulation. Cassie may have been psychologically conditioned over time to believe that orchestrating these freak-offs was expected of her, part of her role in the relationship. Diddy allegedly used manipulation, control, and surveillance. In these kind of environments, victims will feel conditioned to fulfill demands, not because they want to, but because they've learned what happens when they don't. It's like grooming on a long-term scale. Reports say that Diddy was allegedly tracking Cassie. He restricted her career, and he forced her, and I'm making air quotes here, into certain actual situations. And that's not just abuse. That's an entire system of control. When someone controls your money, your location, your opportunities, and even your body, you're not free. No, ma'am. And even when the door is technically open, your mind has been trained to believe you can't walk through it. You've been conditioned to stay. Coercive control is quiet, and it's not always visible to the public, which is why it's so easy for people to say, but she was always smiling in the pictures. Or she had all that money. How could she be a victim? Because control doesn't always look like bruises. Sometimes it looks like a contract, a red carpet, a music video. Can we be real honest here for a minute? Diddy isn't just some ex-boyfriend. He's a billionaire mogul with ties across the industry, across the globe. And by now we've seen what happens when someone crosses him. If Cassie feared for her safety or even the safety of her family, that fear was very real. Power doesn't just come from money, it comes from influence. And someone with that much power doesn't have to say, I'll ruin you, for you to believe that they can. So when people ask why she didn't leave sooner, maybe the better question is, what did leaving cost her? Because she definitely paid a price for staying. Here's another thing people don't always understand. Sometimes victims stay because they love their abuser. Like it or not, that's just facts. And I'd like to argue the point that that isn't weakness. It's what happens when love is weaponized. When the same person who gives you affection also gives you pain, the lines get blurred. And for Cassie, who may have entered the relationship with real feelings, it's possible she was clinging to the idea that things would go back to the beginning. And Diddy could change. That this time it would be different. If you've ever loved someone who hurt you, then you know how that hope becomes a trap. And no, it doesn't make you crazy. You're just waiting on a version of them that doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe it never did. Now, before I move on, there's something else I want to talk about because it comes up in court documents and conversations online. Some people have asked, if Cassie was abused, why would she ever plan or set up those freak-offs that led to her own harm? Well, in abuse situations, sometimes victims participate in or even initiate harmful acts because they believe it'll lessen the intensity of the abuse. Or they think it'll give them a small sense of control over when and how it happens. First, we have to understand that survivors don't always act the way we expect them to. When something is deeply entangled in abuse, especially one rooted in coercive control, they may participate in harmful situations, and not because they want to, but because they feel like it's the only way to survive. Sometimes it's about trying to control the uncontrollable. If I plan it, at least I know what's coming. And that could even be choosing the paid escort who's more gentle or less endowed. It won't hurt as much. Maybe it'll be less violent. Or maybe I won't be punished later. This isn't consent in the traditional sense. It's compliance under duress. It's a way to protect themselves from far worse outcomes. Now, that may be unimaginable in Cassie's situation, but a lot of evil and violent things occurred in that relationship. Studies have shown that long-term victims of abuse often detach themselves to survive. Cassie might have been numb, disconnected from her own agency, and going through the motions in a state of psychological detachment. That kind of numbing can lead people to carry out harmful acts without fully feeling present or aware. It's a coping mechanism, not consent. Now, we talk a lot about fight or flight, but there's another trauma response called fawning. And fawning is when a person tries to please or appease the abuser to stay safe. It can look like affection, sexual compliance, or caretaking behaviors, but it's all based in fear. If Cassie planned things, it might have been an unconscious attempt to stay on Diddy's good side, to prevent explosions by appearing loyal or even enthusiastic. If somebody like Diddy was unpredictable and explosive, and we're told he was, then organizing what he wanted might have felt safer than resisting it. It's something to consider. And we also have to consider conditioning. After years of manipulation, surveillance, and emotional control, a victim can become emotionally numb, disconnected from their own wants and needs. And that's not consent. That's survival, and it's on autopilot. Couple that with illegal substances and you have your own robot. Your wish is my command. There's also the emotional weight of love and dependence. Some victims will feel like enduring or even participating in the abuse is how they prove their loyalty. Abusers are big on loyalty. Well, they don't practice it, but they demand it from you. If I don't do this, he'll leave. He'll replace me. He'll hurt me even worse. And finally, there's the harsh reality of career power dynamics. Cassie may have believed, right or wrong, that doing what Diddy wanted was tied to her survival in the industry. In a world where your image, opportunities, and protections are controlled by your abuser, those decisions aren't about being complicit. They're about calculated survival. So I want to be real clear here. Taking part in abuse under coercion doesn't mean a person is responsible for their own trauma. It means they've been trapped in a system where every option is painful, and they're just trying to make it through. Now, some people will say, well, Cassie stayed. She must have been complicit. And I'm sorry, but we need to challenge that thinking. Because some victims internalize the idea that enduring or organizing harmful acts is an act of love. When abuse is tied up with affection and intimacy, those lines will get blurred. Especially when the abuser rewards you for compliance and punishes you for resistance. Yes, people have agency over their bodies, but agency is limited by the systems they're in. A person raised in a cult has agency, but they're still indoctrinated. A person in an abusive relationship may have choices, but when those choices come with punishment, danger, or shame, it's not a real choice, is it? And in this relationship between Cassie and Diddy, Cassie never had that. When we rush to ask, why didn't she leave or why did she stay? We miss out on an opportunity for reflection, because the truth is, a lot of us know women who stayed. Some have been the women who stayed. Maybe not with a celebrity, but with a narcissist, a manipulator, an abuser. And when we make it sound like leaving is simple, we silence real, painful truth about survival in these kind of relationships. So instead of judgment, let's ask better questions. What support system did she have or not have? What message did the industry send about her speaking out? What trauma did she carry before the relationship even started? Has anyone thought about that? I did hear someone ask, where was Cassie's mother throughout all this? Sure, Cassie was legally an adult at age 19, but she was inexperienced in the dating world and could still benefit from motherly guidance and advice. If you're like me, you probably heard someone say, if Cassie was a real victim, why didn't she press charges? Why did she only sue Diddy for money? This is one of the biggest misunderstandings out there, so let me clear that up right quick. First of all, Cassie couldn't press charges. Victims don't get to do that. Only the state or federal government can file criminal charges. All Cassie could do was report what happened. And if law enforcement didn't pursue it, then that was the end of the criminal route. So she chose the only path still available, a civil lawsuit. And here's why that matters. In criminal court, the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a high bar, especially for abuse cases where there may not be an eyewitness or physical evidence. But in civil court, the standard is lower. Just more likely than not, it happened. And that gives survivors a fair shot at being heard and believed. And let's not forget, Cassie filed her case right before the New York Adult Survivors Act expired. A special 1-year window that allowed adult victims of sexual abuse to file civil claims. Even if the state of limitations had run out. That window didn't apply to criminal cases, though, only civil ones. So no, it wasn't all about money. It was about accountability. It was about using a system that was still open to her after the others had failed. And when people say she just wanted a payout, I ask, would you say the same thing if someone sued after being in a car accident? Because when a victim sues for the destruction of their mental, emotional, and physical safety, that's not greed. That's restitution. Cassie spoke up after years of silence, and she used what legal tools she had. That doesn't make her a gold digger. That makes her a survivor who fought back. And let's not act like Cassie's voice isn't powerful in this situation. At the end of the day, we don't know everything Cassie went through, but what we do know is that she got out, and that matters. Whether it was Stockholm Syndrome, trauma bonding, fear, or love, it was all part of a toxic cycle. And what she deserves now is healing, privacy, and protection. I want this to be a reminder that abuse doesn't always look how we expect it to. If we're going to talk about why Cassie may have taken actions that look confusing from the outside, we have to do it with empathy. Survivors don't always act how we expect. Sometimes they laugh during abuse. Sometimes they stay. Sometimes they comply. And sometimes, tragically, they help carry out the very harm being done to them. And that doesn't mean they're not victims. It means they're doing what they have to do to survive, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Let me know in the comments what you think kept Cassie in that relationship. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.